Welcome back to the future of. This is the space for those curious about the future. My name is Andrea Fonte, and I tell you about technologies, strokes of genius, and discontinuities that could become big and shape the way we will live tomorrow. In this episode, 5 news stories that make us think more than ever about a future full of possibilities. 1. Taxing robots. An in-depth look at Bill Gates' proposal to tax robots, in light of a new study that confirms the merits of the option, but only in the short term. I'll explain why. 2. Floating solar power plant. A 13,000-panel, 6 million kWh per year solar power plant built entirely on water becomes operational in Singapore. 3. No more mergers. A U.S. senator introduces a bill to prohibit companies over a certain size from acquiring smaller players or merging with each other. I'll tell you the pros and cons of the bill. 4. Fighting Alzheimer's. A new project aims to share knowledge among researchers scattered around the world, but also to address the issue with CRISPR technology and pluripotent stem cells. Will this be the one? 5. Nuclear yacht. An eccentric entrepreneur designs a ship for research and conservation of marine environments, based on a molten salt nuclear reactor. Genius or madness? Are you ready? Then hold on tight, buckle up, ready to go.
Taxing robots. Bill Gates caused quite a stir recently when he said we should tax robots that replace workers. As technology grows at an ever-increasing rate, could this be an avenue to support and fund programs like security and social care, especially in aging countries? Now, in the U.S., employees pay a 7.65% payroll tax to cover Social Security and Medicare, and higher-income workers pay an increased tax to also support Medicare. For every portion paid by employees, employers must pay the same. In Italy it works in a similar way. Each worker pays a share of contributions and the company does the same, in different proportions depending on the sectors and types of national contracts. If the workers would be replaced from the robots, obviously there would not be contributions to pay to the imps, neither insurances for the accidents, considering that the robots do not retire and they do not hurt themselves. At most, they break down and require maintenance, or are decommissioned at the end of their life, and replaced with more efficient means. It goes without saying, however, that the state would receive not only less Social Security contributions, but also less taxes, both from robot workers who would not pay them, and from companies that could reduce their tax base, thanks to the depreciation on robots that are deductible. On the other hand, if thanks to robots the productivity of companies increases, they could make more profits and therefore pay more taxes. The argument is complex because of this. There are some effects that pull in one direction and others in the opposite direction. If we look at the problem at a system level, as well as at the level of a single company, the matter becomes even more intricate. The technology, up to now, has on average increased the productivity, and this has lowered the costs, and of reflection in part also the prices. To buy a car, a television set, or a refrigerator 50 years ago was the prerogative of the more affluent categories. Today in the Western countries we often have more than one of these mechanical or electronic slaves. And indeed, we are partly rejecting their ownership, moving to more sustainable, shared and open consumption models. Adding to the debate recently was a study by a group of American and Portuguese researchers, titled "Should We Tax Robots?" Using a quantitative model that characterizes technical progress in automation and workers' choice of skills, the study shows that given the current U.S. tax system, a sustained decrease in automation costs can lead to a massive increase in income inequality. The study concludes that it is optimal to tax robots, while current generations of workers performing routine tasks are still active in the workforce. Once these workers retire, the optimal taxes on robots are zero. Europe has also entered the debate, with a position quite in line with the above. Robots should be taxed now to fund the costs of killing the people replaced by robots, so that they can find new jobs. When these people then retire, theoretically then there would be no need to tax robots, which seems consistent with the study cited above. And while this is being discussed, what is happening in practice around the world? In general, 3 possible paths around a robot tax have been identified. First, the elimination of incentives for investment in automation. Second, increasing the tax burden on companies that leverage automation for higher profits. Third, a tax burden that directly affects robots. South Korea, for example, became the first state to introduce a mechanism that prevents companies from enjoying certain tax incentives if they invest in automation technologies that result in less human labor. Other countries are considering similar measures. Europe, as mentioned, has identified a logic of reuse of the resources possibly taken, but in fact, has not yet issued specific rules. It is not able to tax big tech that make huge profits with a laughable tax burden, let alone tax anyone who uses robots. And this is where another important issue opens up, from which a new social contract could perhaps be started. Some robots, especially physically tangible ones, are able to be clearly identified when performing a previously human task. When Amazon installs a robot in order preparation warehouses, it is clearly replacing one or more physical persons. These you could start taxing right away, and in accordance with the lost human jobs. When, on the other hand, it's an artificial intelligence algorithm that improves Amazon's own sales on the online platform, it's a little harder to figure out which human operator could have performed the same task. And maybe it never existed, since the tool is natively digital. In this case, one can only reason about taxation of downstream profits. If we want to proceed to a taxation, because a wide fringe of economists believes that taxing the productive factors limits the overall welfare of the system. Correct theory, if the companies then downstream really paid taxes on profits, which we know rarely happens thanks to various ploys of fiscal engineering. In short, as you know, it is not a simple topic. If you have considerations and ideas about it, write to me, so as to collect and package everything in a next episode on the subject.
Floating solar power plant. As of a few weeks ago, Singapore is home to one of the largest floating solar power plants in the world, capable of offsetting more than 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. It has been installed at sea in the Strait of Johor, off the woodlands, but I guarantee you that from the photos you have a beautiful view of the city, so we are talking about a facility close to the coast. The installed system is expected to produce, you think, about 6 million kilowatt-hours of energy per year, bringing the country even closer to decarbonization. A giant as long as 7 soccer fields, with over 13,000 solar panels, built in China. I guess you're wondering why build it in the middle of the sea. The main answer, in Singapore's case, is the scarcity of land. The city-state of Singapore, to give you an idea, is about half the size of London, and is also one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide per capita in all of Asia. There's no space, and the already densely populated city evaluates all options to expand, upwards, downwards, and into the sea. And doing so inevitably pollutes. There is certainly also the option of installing solar panels on the roofs of buildings and skyscrapers, but the sea lends itself better, because in fact there is no shade. Buildings produce shade, lower ones could see their energy production capacity limited. And in any case the roofs, however large, are quite limited surfaces, and already partly used for other technological and other services. The choice of the sea, which could act in the future as a forerunner to similar solutions also in lakes or rivers, seems sensible. The sea, among other things, and here I quote the words of the CEO of Sunseap Group, the company that built the structure, is not only a place not obscured by the sun, but also offers low risk of vandalism or theft. And sure, because we're talking about an asset of great value, which is also the starting point for the submarine cable, which transmits the energy generated to the national grid, as well as having a second air-conditioned bridge, which serves as a visitor center and viewing gallery. So, to combine the pleasant with the useful, keeping everything away from possible malicious intent. Of course, it's not all fun and games. Building on the sea is a challenge. The floating system was designed to withstand changing weather conditions, keeping the platform and all operational equipment on board stable. The project was more challenging than land-based or rooftop installations because of the unpredictable nature of the open sea, the need to avoid shipping lanes, and the presence of barnacles. You have to deal with waves, tidal currents, and also biofouling, which is the accumulation of unwanted microorganisms such as plants and algae on surfaces, which grow rapidly in tropical waters, but degrade the materials of which the structure is built. And finally, specific marine skills were also needed for the design and installation of the moorings, another topic that should not be overlooked because the platform is precisely static, it doesn't wander around. The solution chosen was literally to anchor the plant with large chains and concrete blocks laid on the seabed. If we then think that it was built in the middle of the lockdown, with workers who could not sleep on board and, therefore, had to go back and forth from the ground every day, the enterprise is even more worthy. And it doesn't end there. Another project still under development is much larger. We're talking about a 122,000-panel solar farm at Tenge Reservoir, which, when completed later this year, will be one of the largest in all of Southeast Asia. Developed by Sembcorp and the National Water Agency Public Utilities Board, the project will generate enough power to meet the energy needs of all of Singapore's water treatment plants. When you hear that the world is in crisis, there's pandemic, and the economy is sinking, remember what they did in Singapore in the midst of the lockdown.
No more mergers. No, we're not talking about nuclear energy or other wonders of science, we're talking about mergers between large companies. Particularly those of big tech, which for over 20 years have been shopping the market for smaller, but potential, companies to integrate into their portfolios. U.S. Senator Josh Hawley wants to ban companies with a market value of more than $100 billion from acquiring or merging with other companies. The Republican senator, a staunch critic of big tech, on Monday introduced an antitrust bill that would prohibit all mergers and acquisitions for companies with a market value greater than $100 billion. A small family that includes Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, and a few other giants in other industries. So it's not just an idea, it's really a bill. Hawley in a statement Monday said in no uncertain terms, a small group of megacorporations control the products Americans can buy, the information Americans can receive, and the speech they can make. These monopoly powers control our conversations, our economy, our country, and their control has only grown because Washington has aided and abetted their endless quest for power. Boy, that's a stark position expressed in no uncertain terms. Google, Facebook, and other tech giants have come under greater scrutiny for their size and scale. Lawmakers and regulators are concerned about how the power of these behemoths could ultimately harm consumers, especially by stifling competition from Silicon Valley's smaller players. Google is facing 3 antitrust lawsuits simultaneously. Facebook may be considering spinning off Instagram and WhatsApp from the social networking giant due to antitrust complaints it has received. In short, there's already turmoil. And that's not all. The bill, which seeks to reform the Sherman and Clayton antitrust acts, would make it clear that proof of anti-competitive behavior is sufficient to file an antitrust complaint, which would make it easier for federal regulators to go after dominant companies. If the proposal becomes law, this would authorize the Federal Trade Commission to label companies that exercise dominant market power as digital dominant firms and prohibit them from acquiring potential competitors. These companies would also be prohibited from prioritizing their search results without explicitly disclosing this information. And not to be outdone, Hawley has put other non-explicitly digital categories in his crosshairs, such as banks and pharmaceuticals, whose size and concentration would put consumer freedoms at risk. Does any of this make sense? Obviously, I'm not going to be the one to settle such an important debate, but I can see a particularly challenging issue in the background. Today, positions are defined as dominant within a specific sector of economic activity. If I'm in the social networking business and I bought all or most of the social networks on the market in that country, that position would be dominant. If I sell banking services and all the banks merge into one, again we would have a monopoly. Clear? No. But the real questions are other. Because industry boundaries are often blurred. Here we're talking about determining what the boundaries are of the influence exerted on people, rather than that on the relevant economic sectors. Does Facebook dominate the sector of advertising collection or the sector of forming opinions? Does Amazon dominate the online sales sector, or does it influence culture with the products it decides to sell or not to sell? And so on. And therein lies the weakness of the proposal. Senator Hawley proposes an economic criterion, the 100 billion capitalization threshold, to mitigate a non-economic phenomenon, the influence big tech has on people. I leave you with a question: could the economic aspect be integrated with criteria such as the number of users, the average time of use of applications and services, the quality of the content transmitted, and so on?
Fight against Alzheimer's. The failure rate in the search for a viable treatment for Alzheimer's to date is a dismaying 100%, so much so that efforts to find a cure have been called the graveyard of dreams. Alzheimer's disease was first discovered in the early 1900s. Since then, scientists have strived to find the cause that causes the brain to become depleted, but they have not succeeded. The disorder creeps into some aging brains, gradually reducing their ability to think and reason, causing memories and sense of reality to fade. As the world's population ages, Alzheimer's is showing shocking rates of growth. And despite immense efforts, the results are modest. The most important idea today revolves around the so-called amyloid hypothesis. A protein that gradually but silently builds up around a neuron, in the process depriving it of its normal function, and leading to the death of everything inside. Subsequent studies have also found other toxic proteins that wander outside the neuron, gradually poisoning the molecular tenants inside. But we're still a long way from understanding exactly how this works, let alone finding a cure. The time has come to join forces between different research paths. The iPSC Neurodegenerative Disease Initiative was created to do just that. The project aims to stimulate, accelerate, and support research that will lead to the development of better treatments and preventions for this distressing disease. All datasets resulting from the research will be openly shared online, and anyone will be able to access and interpret them. But it's not just a database issue, there's much more to it than that. The idea is simple. Decades of research have found certain genes that appear to increase the likelihood of Alzheimer's. We're talking hundreds of genes, mind you. Figuring out how each one connects to or influences the other takes years of research in individual labs. Scientists now want to come together, tapping into a shared resource, and solve the problem collectively. That is, by working together. And how do you do that? The initiative's secret weapon is so-called induced pluripotent stem cells, known as iPSCs. Similar to most stem cells, this type of cell has the ability to transform into any other type of cell. This is not the place to delve into how a cell, for example of the skin, is able to be reborn as a brain cell, but for the purposes of this post let's just keep in mind that it can happen, and it is real. When these gene cells transform into a brain cell, they carry with them the original genes of their donor, which means they harbor the person's genetic inheritance, including their chance of developing Alzheimer's. If we introduce Alzheimer's-related genes into these reborn stem cells, and watch how they behave, we may be able to follow the clues that lead to the genetic causes of Alzheimer's, paving the way for gene therapies to nip them in the bud. It's brilliant, reconstructing Alzheimer's in lab cells instead of studying it in real people. I'll try to put it another way. See if I can make it clearer. Using CRISPR technology, scientists will add more than 100 Alzheimer's-related genes inside iPSCs from a wide variety of healthy donors. The result is a massive genome engineering project, leading to an entire library of cloned cells that cause mutations that lead to Alzheimer's. In other words, rather than studying cells from people with Alzheimer's, we're trying to give normal, healthy brain cells Alzheimer's by injecting them with genes that might contribute to the disorder. But in the lab, without risking killing a patient. If you see the genes as software code, then you can insert the code that potentially drives Alzheimer's into those cells through gene editing. Run the program, and you will be able to observe how the neurons behave. If you then make a shared database of all this, and study together all the genes, the effects they have, and the interaction with each other, sooner or later the hope is to cross the right combination that leads to the disease. And then nip it in the bud.
Nuclear yacht. If you're a millionaire, in a few years you may be able to take a 10-day ride on a nuclear-powered, emission-free yacht for the modest price of $3 million. But if you're a lucky student, or a scientist selected to help study the effects of climate change, the trip will be free. The yacht in question, called Earth 300, will be a global icon for science, according to the website chronicling the project. The plan is to set sail in 2025, with 160 scientists on board, representing a variety of disciplines, 20 students, 165 employees and 40 VIP guests, which are precisely those who will pay $3 million each for their tickets, effectively funding the entire expedition. Aaron Oliveira, the CEO of Earth 300, said the origin of his idea dates back to 2015, when he went on a dive in the Maldives and saw dead coral killed by ocean hyperacidification. So he'd come up with the idea of bringing the brightest and smartest scientists aboard a New Age ship to work together to find solutions to climate change. But instead of settling for renting or building just any oceanographic research ship, the protagonist of this story decided to go a hair bigger. The design of the ship, which will be powered by safe, sustainable atomic energy from a molten salt reactor, will have 22 state-of-the-art laboratories equipped with artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, real-time data processing, and even an advanced quantum computer. It will be 300 meters long, or about 3 soccer fields, 46 meters wide, and 60 meters high at its highest point, practically that of an 18-story building. His words describe the ambition of the project, of which he speaks strictly in the present tense. It's a ship that has the overall size of a cruise ship, but it's not a cruise ship. It has the overall look of a superyacht, but it's not a superyacht. It has the technology to compete with an aircraft carrier, but it is not an aircraft carrier. It will have the endurance and capabilities of an exploration vessel, but it's not an exploration vessel. It's all these things put together in one package. A toy, which as you can imagine, will also cost more to build than the sea itself. Oliveira has already invested $5 million in the design, and some European and South Korean shipyards will likely do the construction, Entrepreneur magazine reported. The news site said the total cost of the ship is estimated to be between $500 million and $700 million, with some funding coming from private investors. We don't know much more than that. Coming to the core technology, a molten salt nuclear reactor is no joke. It's a type of nuclear fission reactor where the primary coolant, or even the fuel itself, is a molten salt mixture. Molten salt nuclear reactors operate at a higher temperature than water-cooled reactors, for higher thermodynamic efficiency. Operating at atmospheric pressure, among other things, reduces mechanical stress, simplifies design issues, and improves safety. And that of Earth 300 is not the only project under development, although according to my research, it seems to me the only one applied to marine navigation. So let's acknowledge that the project may be technologically feasible. What I'm wondering, however, is whether it makes sense to invest $700 million, to arrive perhaps in 2025 to launch the first exploration. With the same resources, who knows how many missions of study and environmental protection could have been done in the same time, and with less drumbeat.
Thanks for listening to the future of, really. You could have listened to the radio, you could have spun a vinyl, you could have put on a cassette, you could have used a stereo 8 to know what it was, but instead you preferred the future of. That's what I thank you for, and you still have hundreds of episodes left to discover. Sentence of the week. Richard Bach wrote, "Do not turn away from possible futures before you are certain that you have nothing to learn from them."